Who is Gore Vidal? I am at heart, he says, a propagandist, a tremendous hater, a tiresome nag, complacently positive that there is no human problem which could not be solved if only people would do as I advise. He lives in Italy, but he spends at least a couple of months in the United States each year, his annual refresher course, hawking a new book if he has one, appearing on talk shows, casting his pearls before the provincial folks at home. We followed Vidal for some weeks in Italy and the United States to get a close-up look at this author, social critic, dilettante anthropologist. Vidal's penthouse apartment in Rome is a salon for an assortment of Romans, aristocrats and artists, film stars and models, politicians and writers. And they like to hear his gossip about his contemporaries. For instance, Truman Capote and Norman Mailer.
Mailer, I think, is absolutely an atrocious personality. But by atrocious, I mean his hatred of women, his absolutely demented machismo. He's against contraception, he's against abortion. That's why I say he's like a VFW commander in Schenectady. It makes it a very I said, Truman Capote has spent most of his life trying to get into a world with some success that I have spent most of my life trying with some success to get out of.
This man has shared Vidal's life for 24 years. Howard Austin, friend, cook, social secretary. Vidal does most of his writing above the Amalfi Coast south of Naples in a kind of Berchtesgaden, a 5-story establishment hanging from the cliffs of Ravello, complete with its own vineyard and lemon orchard. He bought all this with the proceeds of 4 bestsellers. He writes fast and in longhand. He's produced 14 novels in the last 30 years, plus 4 Broadway plays, countless films and television dramas, and a profusion of essays and poems. His first novel, written at 19, was Willywaw. Then The City and the Pillar on homosexuality, Messiah, Julian, Washington, D.C., Myra Breckenridge, 2 Sisters, Burr, and Myron. He has been variously labeled a superlative writer whose elegance is unmatched and a sly pornographer who squanders his formidable talent. At 10, he read the congressional record to his blind grandfather, Senator Thomas Gore. His father, Eugene Vidal, was FDR's chief of civil aviation. His mother, remarried to Louis Auchincloss, made him a stepbrother to Jacqueline Bouvier, later Kennedy, because her mother also married Auchincloss. Thus, a relationship to the Kennedys, support in his losing bid for a congressional seat in 1962, and entree to the White House. His political satire, The Best Man, was a big Broadway hit while Jack Kennedy was president. When we sat down in his living room at Ravello, we talked of sensuality and sin, of politics and people. We began with Jack Kennedy.
I liked him tremendously, and I hang his picture in my library, not as an icon, not as a memory of Camelot, not as a memory of glorious nights at the White House or in Bel Air, but never again to be taken in by anybody's charm. And he was one of the most charming men I've ever known, one of the most intelligent, and one of the most disastrous presidents I think we've ever had.
Vidal blames Kennedy most for committing the United States so substantially to Vietnam.
And prepared the way for the corn-pone Genghis Khan, Lyndon Johnson's attempted conquest of Asia. And we're still paying for that.
What is your current relationship with Mrs. Onassis, your stepsister?
I haven't seen her since 1962. There's no reason for our lines to cross. She was devoted to Bobby Kennedy, and I was, as you know, plainly not. And we fell out over that. And we've not come each other way. I kind of like her, though. She's very bright. Unlike most of the family, she is quite intelligent, quite shrewd, knows exactly what she wants, which very few people do. And I think kind of admirable.
Good first lady?
Oh, that? No, very bad, I should think.
Because?
But then you saw my ideas of first ladies, and that, what a god-awful phrase that is. presidents' wives, I mean, mine is based on Mrs. Roosevelt.
Whom you admired immensely.
Yes, and I think that if you are given a great place in life, you must do something in exchange for it. I'm an old-fashioned Puritan about that. And she had no interest in anything but herself.
Mrs. Kennedy.
Yeah, which is all right. I mean, that's her character. But it is not noble.
Vidal can be at his most engaging and provocative when he talks of sex. But when it comes to love, he is somehow uneasy.
Love, Gore.
Well, that's a moving phrase.
What does it mean, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I don't like the word love. It's like patriotism. It's like the flag. It's the last refuge of scoundrels. When people start talking about what wonderful, warm, deep emotions they have, and they are loving people, I watch out. Somebody's going to steal something. Romantic love, as Americans conceive it, does not exist, hence the enormous divorce rate, because whatever it is sexual that first brings them together. When that cools, there's often not much left.
You've lived with a man for 23, 24 years.
Yes.
You have never been in love with him, nor are now. You are simply good companions. I'm not sure that I understand.
Well, haven't I proved it by living with somebody for 24 years? That's obviously not being in love. If you're in love, that is something very intense and generally very brief, as has been most people's experience. You don't live with the person you're in love with, I should think. At least I've known very few cases of it.
You mean it's an arrangement of convenience for you?
No, it just, you live with a friend, that's all, which is something quite different from having a grand passion or having a love affair.
Well, you live with a friend, but you have sexual congress, if you will, with an assortment of friends.
No, certainly. I'm devoted to promiscuity, and always have been. I believe the more you do, the better it is for you. I'm a great health nut. And sex is, I think, absolutely marvelous for the whole system. Tones you up.
You take a certain satisfaction in the fact that American attitudes about sex, sexual liberation, sensuality, whatever, have changed considerably, particularly in the last half dozen years.
Yes, indeed. And I certainly am happy to take a good deal of credit for that. Because, I think it was necessary. I think part of the sickness of the country has come from a degree of repression. I think a great deal of the misadventure in Vietnam came out of a kind of deranged machismo on the part of the American rulers. We've had two presidents, which I think were clearly pathological types, Lyndon Johnson and Nixon in a row. And the people aren't dumb, but the people, I guess, are kind of morbid. They like these extraordinarily crazy people who get up there very intense. And as you look at them, you expect suddenly a little door will open, and a bird will come out. Sooner or later, they're going to go mad on air. And this, I guess, is exciting. I think it's a little sick, but it's very exciting for the audience out there.
Not so long ago, Gore, you wrote, "It could be said with almost the best will in the world that we've created a hell and called it the American way of life." Serious?
Oh, I think serious, yes. Certainly most people living in America would agree. I saw the last statistic on people who wanted to emigrate was something like 34 million Americans wanted to emigrate, preferably to Australia.
Where in the world did you see that statistic?
Gallup poll. I read the Gallup poll faithfully. Of course, I don't believe it when it goes against my prejudices, but whenever it does supports one, I always quote it.
The fact is that his statistics are wildly wrong. The Gallup poll said no such thing. We went along with Vidal on his yearly inspection tour of the United States to watch him as he sought to confirm his prejudices. These yearly hegiras, these back-home pilgrimages, are for him a mixture of Chautauqua, sales meeting, and Sunday sermon. He loves to startle. He wants to drop pebbles into a sensitive pool and watch the waves he causes. He looks like the most respectable of men and then expresses the least respectable views.
I said, he could strangle Pat to death on the television. And they would say, no, 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 she was having a heart attack, and he was holding her up by the neck.
Best of all, he likes the TV talk shows. He's a compulsive performer, always available, even in a supporting role.
Because everything I talk about comes either from here or from here, or both places.
Let me ask you, I was just fascinated by the Nixon of the transcripts, as we all were, the way he talked.
Well, I think the profanity is just unbelievable.
He has been called the best political novelist since Disraeli. He has also been called a commie pinko fag by a former officer of the Yale Political Union. Speaking on the State of the Union and other catastrophes, here is Gore Vidal.
At Yale, as everywhere, Vidal is a crowd pleaser. an intellectual vaudevillian.
The first thing concerning our fellow citizens today is the economy. We'll leave that out and start right in on something we hear about at election time, law and order. The FBI has always been a collaborating tool of reactionary politicians. The Bureau has also had a nasty talent for amusing presidents with lurid dossiers on the sex lives of their rivals. I remember Jack Kennedy once showing me a little report on his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, on his private life in peccadillos, and Jack said, "You know, Lyndon's very active." That was a case where the information put the vice president in good standing. But then we always said that Jack would do for sex what Eisenhower had done for golf. Now some modest proposals for the future of the American empire. At the moment, things are not going very well. Can you hear in back? I was told this thing didn't work. No? More projection? At the turn of the century. Can you hear that? I say 1/3 of a nation. Ill-groomed. We will do no more Roosevelt imitations for those of you too young to remember. I'm one of the few people who used to be able to do Eisenhower. In a true democracy, there is no place for a serious difference of opinion on great issues.
He sells books when he does the lecture circuit, but he sells tickets too and pockets a big fee. And he likes the feedback that he gets, the questions from the audience.
You remind me of a woman I once had at a meeting who got up and said, in the Salinas Valley, "Mr. Vidal, as an ordinary housewife, what can I do to fight communism?" is my first question. And secondly, Mr. Vidal, what is communism?
Vidal says that he gets a kind of electric shock from rubbing shoulders with people in small towns, though he is bewildered by some of it, as by the chorus that came to serenade him in Parkersburg, West Virginia. His tour began on the East Coast and went on for a month of one-night stands.
The end of the affair.
By the time I caught up with him at the end of a ladies' luncheon, Vidal had persuaded himself that America was going to hell in a handbasket. When I put it to him that he was too gloomy, that he didn't know enough and hadn't seen enough to arrive at that cataclysmic conclusion, he wearily had at me.
Mike, I am so in touch with reality, and you are so far off base that I cannot begin to save your soul in the remaining seconds that are left to us. I am absolutely right in the general line that I have taken on what is wrong. This country was a success because of cheap labor and cheap energy. We're never going to have that again. We're going to have to contract. We don't know how to adjust to this. We're going to have less gross national product, not more. I mean, we are headed for a complete economic crack-up. There is no doubt about that, and I can quote you any number of bankers from one end of Zurich to Basel.
Are you planning to spend your last days with us here in the bunker, or are you simply going to abandon us to our fate?
You know, I never, this idea that I'm some sort of expatriate, it makes, it's good publicity for those who would like to undermine my views. But I never have been an expatriate. I've been involved in elections and in the life of this country. Now, I think as the times get bad, and I see darkness all around me, and I see these disintegrating cities, and I watch these frightened people, they're getting scared, I would be very inclined then to return, because if there is a disaster, then you have a part to play. And I think that if the world is about to end, or at least the society as we have known it is cracking up, then it's best to end your days, as it were, on native ground.
Nonetheless, it turns out, Vidal is still an expatriate in Ravello. In his basement gymnasium there, he contemplates past glories in the posters on his walls, while toning up his muscles, no doubt, against that impending doomsday.